Welcome to Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation possible. You will get to hear from CSIA system integrators and industry partners to get a better understanding of how they help their clients solve process challenges and how they've earned success in their careers. Along the way, we will touch on system integration best practices, technology, trends, and challenges. Whether you are a manufacturer, end user, supplier, or system integrator, you will enjoy the insights these industry professionals bring to this podcast. Let's get started. Hi, my name is Lisa Richter, the host of Talking Industrial Automation, a podcast where you get to know the people who make modern industrial automation and processing possible. In today's episode, we're talking industrial automation with Kacie Chitwood, who is an account executive with Miller Resource Group, an executive search firm specializing in food manufacturing and industrial technology. Kacie joined Miller in 2023, where she uses her nearly 3 decades of sales experience at the intersection of technology, education, and community to connect candidates to the right opportunities. Currently, she works with system integrators to help them source engineering talent. Her lifelong commitment to servant leadership shapes not only her approach to life, but also to her work. Kacie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So grateful to be here, Lisa.
So let's start out with a question that I usually ask people on this podcast, and that is, how do you describe to people what it is that you do?
I think the most easy explanation is I'm a matchmaker. I'm helping companies fill key roles, particularly, of course, in engineering, and a lot of sales engineers and controls engineers. But we're moving business objectives forward for the client and the candidate, making sure we have a good match to ensure those goals can be met as well as possible.
A little bit more about your background. How did you get started and what happened along the way?
Well, it's been a windy road, but I've always been in consultative sales, Lisa. I really enjoy being at that apex of helping somebody take a new step forward. I actually started my career in IT, and I'm going to date myself just a little bit here because it was actually before people networked PCs, and I began my technical sales adventure with Digital Equipment Corporation for a distributor. And that sort of evolved over time as technology continues to evolve, and eventually was selling Nobel Networks and networking PCs. And my biggest client was the first online education provider in the States. And I eventually joined them as a admissions advisor and a faculty member. Really have always been a strong believer in education to develop skills, of course. And I'm a teacher's kid. Both of my parents were public school teachers, so it's sort of in my blood. But eventually, my passion for education and technology has once again merged here at Miller as a recruiter. I love the ability to work one-on-one with the candidate, really dig into what they value and what is really going to help them thrive professionally. And of course, ensuring that I have a very firm understanding of our clients' needs and their culture and what they're seeking in terms of the ideal candidate. So I really am excited to be in manufacturing now. It's such an interesting space. We get so much growth and evolution happening every day. And so when I joined Miller, I sort of felt like I finally got a chance to put all of those things back together again. And I'm really enjoying the way this particular area of recruiting just continues to keep me learning and also challenges me to stay educated.
Did I also read somewhere that you at one point taught Spanish? Were you learning Spanish language? Yeah.
Sí, señora. You know, a lot of these past several years, last 2 decades, I was also a mom raising 2 kids who are now in their early 20s. So a few of those roles along the way were in order to meet up with their hours and to be available for the kids during the after school period, et cetera. So I was very fortunate to be a teacher at a local Catholic junior high school here where I live in Naperville for a little over 3 years. And that did include a role as Spanish and a religion teacher, believe it or not.
Presumably you speak Spanish fairly well if you're teaching it. Do you use that at all in your career today?
On occasion, I do speak with engineers Certainly, most of them are bilingual, but we have a lot of fun kind of the back and forth. It can be very much threaded. Both English and Spanish tends to be more typical, especially when we start to talk technical terms. I don't have that strong of a command on that side of my Spanish proficiency, but essentially, yes. My husband would tell you that when I am maybe had a glass of wine or in a situation where my energy is really amped up, my Spanish gets a lot better.
Sounds better anyway.
Exactly. It comes back to me for some reason more quickly.
Back to the script here. Tell me a little bit more about Miller Resource. How did it begin and how did it evolve over the years?
Miller is such a great story. We have been in this industry for so long. It's been 55 years. We were founded in 1970, and our founder purchased Miller at that time. Gary Miller is a legend in our industry. We grew up with the PLC. And as the years of cold calling through the phone book have transformed through tools like LinkedIn, we really still do meet candidates and clients exactly where they are today. And of course, ensure that we meet their mutual needs and goals. That drives all of the actions that we take to connect them with the community of talent in our sector. So we stay abreast of the ever-changing sector, but we remain true to our manufacturing roots. As a matter of fact, a point of pride that we feel really proud of is that not only have we had clients come back to us and ask us to help their own children, but at this point, even their own grandchildren in navigating their employment path. People trust us because of our history and our vast network and connections in this space. I guess over the years, you could say we now facilitate close to 75 interviews a month, and we place approximately 170 to 80 candidates a year. And it's a team of just 20 or so of us. We're a small family. We share the client stories with one another. We collaborate very effectively to really put together a tactical search that has continued to evolve and be perfected with the tools that are available. But whatever we can do to leverage the market and the tools available to assist our clients, we're going to go to bat for them and really help those candidates find the ideal place to thrive. One way we do that is through our branding initiatives, and it's really important that we are connected in the industry through organizations like CSIA, and we belong to others like A3 or MCAA. But being a part of the industry associations and connecting with others in this sector is really a big part of the Miller story. And we're so grateful for the name recognition it continues to give us. But at 55 years of age, we have a lot of connections and a really fun story to tell our candidates and clients.
So for those folks who may not understand what a company like Miller Resource does, even though you've talked a little bit about it, but explain the business model. I guess basically who's covering the fee for the service? Because back in the day, there was this perception that the candidate had to pay somebody to help them find a job. But clear that up for us. Help us understand.
I'm really glad that you asked, because you're right. There is sort of a sense out there that in some cases, candidates actually do retain recruiters on their behalf. But our business model is in the automation sector, our clients pay the fees. And so our candidates never pay for our services. And clients pay for our industry experience. Our vast network, helps to connect them with professionals, especially those that might not be actively seeking work at this time. We have a really deep network, vast network of people, top tier industry professionals who wouldn't otherwise be accessible to our clients because they're just not either actively looking or they just don't have the network to access like they do on their own when they're seeking candidates through their own resources. Every type of role essentially can be worked and filled through our resources. And it's not uncommon for us to help startups fill out their entire organizational chart. They pay our fees based on the salary level of the employee. And the best match is when we collaborate closely with the hiring team. So really helping them to better refine their process, as well as working in close collaboration to ensure that the culture fit, as well as the opportunity for the candidate to not only meet the objectives of a role, but to thrive in their culture as well. So it's really a sense of the client and us working side by side to be as efficient as we can. And of course, utilize all of the resources at our disposal to it as quickly as we can fill those roles. Because of course, the cost of sometimes having a role unfilled or even the potential mishire, the benefit being that we're going to have a lot that closer ability to screen candidates and bring them to their attention before they're spending time on candidates who maybe haven't been vetted effectively or don't really check all of the key boxes before somebody sets time aside to interview. You and I both know integrators in particular, they don't have bandwidth to have someone focused always entirely on hiring. So it's a real privilege to get to tell their story in the market. And that's kind of what I feel like we do. We're storytellers.
So tell me a little bit more about what's unique about how you approach filling a position or even maybe finding clients. Tell me a little bit more about what's unique.
Well, I think probably the key is, of course, developing the relationship, really understanding why the role is open, what potentially the cost is of it remaining open, whether or not clients choose to always take advantage. One of the neat insights that we provide is a tool called Advanced Insight. Might also be known by some folks as DISC assessment. This is a tool that allows us to really do a better job of vetting candidates by simply using 3, I guess it's kind of like unique psychologies, and it really helps not only candidates identify what environments they thrive in, but from the client perspective, it allows them to see what motivates the potential candidate, how they think, and how they approach problems, people, and processes. So essentially, one of the ways that we ensure that culture fit is we'll have the hiring team take this assessment tool, and then we'll sort of gauge and balance the results of the potential candidates within what seems to be the ideal fit for their culture based on how they motivate people, processes, and solve problems. So that's one way that I think we set ourselves apart. We really aim to be an extension of the hiring team. We're big believers in that tool. I think it really helps us to ensure that by the time we reach the point of hire, that the client and candidate are really well aligned in congruence in terms of what they both hope to achieve in the role and get things started right away.
Do you ever get some resistance to it from either side of the equation? I know just knowing how engineers are, and if they feel like anything's too, I want to say like woo-hoo or like, I don't know, like not based in empirical evidence, they're a little skeptical. So do you run into that? And if you do, how do you overcome that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the established results are so well documented. If I share some of the history and the background with the tool and really help them understand that ultimately the goal is for them to know that this is the culture fit that they need to thrive in their future career path, I have yet to find that really is a resistance that I can't overcome. One other thing that I don't think that I really mentioned about something unique about our approach is also just that it's proven, and this is true of any recruiter really, but it's proven that when you hear something third party, right, as you know, as a marketer, right, the value of that word of mouth, you might be driving by that catering shop or that bakery every day on your way to work. But until the person that you hear at the grocery store or somebody over here in a conversation strongly advocating that business, and in our case, it would be strongly advocating either the client or the candidate, depending on who I'm speaking to, that's proven third-party information can really assist in validating and helping somebody really believe that there is worth in the candidate or the client that I'm representing. So I think that is a really important thing to just remember because it's almost so basic that we forget. But people are really often more inclined to take stock in something that comes from a third party. So we play a crucial role.
So tell me a little bit about what you're hearing from your clients. What challenges are they facing? Obviously, talent shortage is like a big one that we hear over and over and over again. But what can you tell me about that?
Well, I think there's a few things that I see as consistent themes if we're going to talk challenges for the clients that I work with. Clearly, we're working in an election year, so that in itself is always an unpredictable external environment. But I think we can all agree that the economic forecast has been a little bit difficult to predict. And so, of course, that affects the ability for their clients to launch projects and make capital expenditures possible, which then makes our systems integrator partners a little bit more challenged in the way they predict their workload. And of course, that certainly affects their hiring forecasting. So I think that makes it the most challenging. If I were to say the first challenge would be obviously unpredictable economic setting. It's clear, though, that as you already alluded to, we have a lot of opportunity to bring new talent into this particular space. There are a lot of engineers, of course, experienced engineers who are retiring, and that skills gap between experienced engineers and junior engineers is a challenge that all of the clients that I work with are trying to overcome. Mentoring, of course, is just a huge part of what a senior controls engineer is basically now expected to do in almost every role that I fill. But my experience is those clients who have made a significant commitment to development and actually even have gone so far as maybe to put together levels of engineering in terms of their own organizational chart that are specific thresholds or metrics that, say, an entry-level engineer, a mid-level engineer, or senior-level engineer meet. And when that's clearly defined, as well as the understanding that experienced engineers are mentoring, junior-level engineers are also mentoring and being mentees, and that overall culture awareness of the development responsibilities of everyone seems to be those most attractive places to work, as well as I think doing a really good job of working with educational institutions and helping them to better prepare engineers in this space. So there's just so much opportunity there, but for sure, it seems like the disconnect has created challenges that we're now recognizing and are working hard to overcome.
Hey there. I'm interrupting this program with an update that, if I'm being completely honest, most people won't really care about. But hear me out. CSIA recently launched a brand new website, and it looks pretty cool. Of course, I would say that because I led the project, and I'm really only mentioning it because the site has a brand new open forums feature, sort of like a Reddit for system integrators and those who love them. For now, this online discussion forum is for CSIA members only. It's free, and anyone with a CSIA member company can participate, but you do need to sign up. Don't worry, it's super easy. Just go to www.controlsys.org/forum and subscribe to the topics you're interested in. After you log in, of course. And if you need help with that, check the FAQs. We made sure there was a lot of material there because everyone knows an engineer loves a DIY. See you on the interwebs. I was on LinkedIn, as we do, and scrolling through there, and I came across a post from Chase Baker, who is the owner of B&B Search. And his post said that the average salary of a senior controls engineer per ZipRecruiter is just shy of $120K. And that for a junior controls engineer, that average is about $72K. The interesting tidbit, though, in this post is that he reckons a controls engineer typically jumps up 50% from year 1 to year 5. That's incredible. And then after that, salary increases stabilize to more typical levels from then on. So 2 questions. 1, does this jibe with your experience? And 2, what does that mean for controls engineers and others who are navigating the market?
Absolutely jives with my experience. As a matter of fact, kudos to Chase. I reached out to him after he shared that with me, and we're connected now. So thank you for sharing his insight. I see that senior engineers with like 8+ years of experience who are specifically self-starters and enjoy mentoring and really want to dig further into project management as a larger scope of their work tend to be able to demand an even additional increase of maybe 10 to 12% on that cap you mentioned. And even more so, the truth, if they're willing to move to a less populated part of the US, as I'm sure you're well aware, there are places that are much more challenged. And we didn't talk about that as one of the challenges, but certainly geography does play a role. As far as what this means for controls engineers who want to navigate the market, each situation is obviously unique. Every person is going to take on this journey in their own way, but there is kind of a predictable arc in the controls engineer employment path. And, it starts at a foundational level where you're really starting to put the complexities of the role into place. And then that practice, those years where you're really beginning to understand from the theoretical concepts to the hands-on and continuing to practice until you reach a state of mastery where we see more of our senior and experienced controls engineers. And so that arc, I think, is the same, or it should be predictable to some extent. And a good controls engineer navigating a path would be wise to sort of be paying attention to when they're sort of ready to make that next step into that next phase. But, managing projects, I've mentioned, is something that is becoming more and more in high demand. Another thing that I think is interesting as you think about navigating this space is some systems integrators will really rely on their controls engineers for business development as a part of their role, which is not always a comfortable place for engineers. So to know that they're sort of expected to uncover additional opportunities for business is sometimes a new way of conducting themselves. Others seem to align with that or just more naturally sort of think that way. So having, a little bit more of a business mindset is also something that I think can set somebody apart as they navigate this market. I find some integrators want somebody who knows their niche to the extent that they've built the exact same custom machines before. Other integrators are very interested in agnostic systems engineers or controls engineers that have touched everything, because I believe, of course, they can put them right into a project and, they have more experience to bring to the table. They can jump right in. I find from an engineering perspective, it's not uncommon, though, for me to talk to someone who's done a bit of project management, has taken on more of that type of business and operational responsibility. And then it's not uncommon for me to hear from somebody who says, I miss tech. I want to go back. I need to go back and touch it again. And I love those conversations because this is sort of part of that arc, right? And they get one step away. And as you know, engineers, they're just insatiable in their thirst for knowledge. And once they get to a point where they're kind of plateaued, they don't know what to do with themselves. So I love that it's always the feeling of accomplishment. At the end of the day, we both know that's what drives most of our behaviors. But in this particular space, I think it's even more the case that if an engineer is navigating as a recruiter, I would advise them to always be seeking that collaboration with their colleagues, that ongoing learning, and that we want them to always gain that sense of achievement that they are chasing.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well when I've talked to different people, even on this podcast. They're like, well, I chose this job because it allowed me to still keep my hand in the tech while also progressing my career. So totally get that perspective for sure. So I'm interested in the tension between the idea that employers are struggling to hire and retain and what that means for candidates. How can they navigate this market to make good decisions for their careers and families?
I think there are so many factors that need to be measured in terms of what a candidate really values. And of course, the point in time that they're in their own family plays a huge role in what they value. For instance, recently I worked with a controls engineer who was making his next move based on where homeschooling was going to be the most productive. And there was a lot of support for homeschooling in the state his family chose to move to next. Sometimes, of course, access to medical care or healthcare can be a big factor in somebody's decisions. So there's always going to be things that candidates value that you and I wouldn't maybe presume out the gate. As I've already mentioned, relocation can help someone really leverage this market. If you're open to moving, that can really help you jump up a career ladder a little more effectively. Location is a key factor in a lot of the big searches that we do. Sign-on or relocation bonuses are something that clients can offer that plays a role. Ideal compensation package. I guess the big message there for me would be perks matter. I think there are a lot of ways to offer non-salary compensation that are becoming more and more creative and less typical, which is exciting for engineers, especially those, like I said, who are a little bit more open to jumping into a new challenge or maybe even relocating. It's essentially companies who can get creative, can offer maybe 401k dollars, additional bonus incentives, maybe even more PTO, can really help develop a more desired work-life balance, which we both know in this space in particular can be pretty challenging. So that flexibility is really key to making a job attractive for a potential candidate. The ideal compensation package is going to be unique to each individual. So that's where having a recruiter to sort of translate in between the candidate and the client, again, can really help put the right package together that will definitely get the deal done.
Something you said that really resonates with me is aligning what's going to matter to the person at the stage of their life and career where they are. So like if you're hiring a 20-something, 401k, whatever, I got plenty of time to worry about that, right? Mm-hmm. But maybe what matters to them is that they're near someplace where they can go out and have fun and meet people. So totally thinking it through from the candidate's perspective, I imagine is very valuable from the employer's perspective. Yeah. Instead of just thinking about what they need, think about a little bit what the candidate might what might
Some
be?
employers are fortunate. They're not as quite challenged by, say, geography as one that I know I keep echoing, but it does really play a big role for some of my clients. But I think your point to be even well explained further would be, I'm working with a client right now who is in a remote place, but in their community, there's an existing scholarship for all public school kids to attend state-run universities on full scholarship if they live and reside in this community.
Wow.
That would be really appealing for someone who had young children, right?
Yep.
Or school-age kids of any age. And then, of course, there are other levels of engineers, more senior, that when I tell them that not only will their 401k be matched, but an additional X percentage on top of what you would expect, that is a really big win. And oftentimes it's that extra 5 days of PTO instead of 10, offering someone 15. That just is an amazing perk. It really can make a big difference. I think we're going to see a lot more of it.
Yep. What advice can you give candidates who might be looking to change jobs?
Well, I think if you're open to working with a recruiter and you find one you trust, this is just such a great way to kind of have another set of eyes and ears in the market on your behalf. They help you to stay abreast of what's changing in the market. Certainly getting involved in organizations like CSIA and other networking groups, attending trade shows and events, both in real life and online. Participation is just really great to build your network. And we're so lucky to be living at a time where that is just so possible, right? Creating a presence online can be a really effective way to increase your connections and the opportunities that come your way. Obviously, most importantly, improving your skills and knowledge, devoting time. And it's not easy to do in this day and age. There's such a vast amount of information. So utilizing more of skills, specifically targeting skills development like AI or data analytics, and communication skills are key. Whether that's formal, furthering your education, there's so many certification programs out there. I often encourage engineers to look into, what is the speaking group called, Lisa? I'm losing, I can't.
Toastmasters?
Yeah,
Toastmasters.
Yeah, that can be a really effective way to sort of get over some of those initial, just not always expected to communicate. Be the forefront communicator isn't always an expectation of young engineers. So to further that confidence, maybe another way to do that would be through Toastmasters. I think as well, in terms of actually helping a candidate prepare for an interview, one thing that I've found to be really helpful is reminding engineers that are job seekers in that mode that they're selling themselves. They are salespeople. And again, that's not always a comfortable place for many of them. So to really help them realize how to get into sales mode and gain comfort in that space is a goal I often have prior to an interview. One of the most typical conversations I'll have with the potential candidate is before they really understand the role, they'll begin to tell me all about the technical knowledge and project history that has brought them to where they are today. And while sometimes it might happen to be exactly relevant and what I need to know to really tell their story effectively, other times I have to just stop and say, hey, let me give you a chance to ask some questions about how this might be like a previous role. So like you're uncovering a business opportunity, like you're collaborating closely with the customer to develop the perfect solution. Let's figure out maybe a little bit more about what this particular job needs and what are the problems it solves. And then we can help figure out where your skills are really going to best address the issues at hand. So trying to help them see it as a solution as well as they're selling themselves. And that comes together in the close, right? So always ask for the next step at the end of an interview. It's funny, but that tends to be something that often I'm told after the fact. So glad you told that to me. That was something I really needed to hear. I've forgotten or I've never closed like that. I spoke with a 33-year veteran engineer about a month ago, and that conversation came up and he's like, no one has ever told me to do that before. It's like, what?
You're dealing with such a wide range of people who may or may not be experienced in job searching, which isn't correlated with age. Like you said, it could be somebody hasn't gone out to look for a job in 20 years. Mm-hmm. The market's so changed and how you do your resume is so changed. And,
sure.
All that stuff. So yeah, super interesting. Let me ask you a question. Don't get mad. How many people in your life truly understand what it is that you do? I'm willing to guess the answer is not too many. I get it. So many of us toil in anonymity. But What if I told you that I have a place where you can go to meet and talk and commiserate with people who do understand what you do because they do the same thing? Amazing, I know. But that's really the bottom line what CSIA is all about. And recently, we've expanded our learning and networking opportunities to help you find your people. We are calling them special interest groups. These groups are aligned around topics such as emerging leaders or marketing, and they meet virtually throughout the year with some plans for meeting in person as well, probably in conjunction with the CSIA annual conference. We will be bringing more online throughout the year, but for now, if either of those topics sound interesting, go to www.controlsys.org/events to check out what we have lined up. Full disclosure, you do need to be a member of CSIA to join the marketing SIG, but the emerging leaders one is open to anyone who wants to give it a try. So why not take a minute and check out the upcoming schedule at www.controlsys.org/events. Your people are waiting. What advice would you give to somebody who might be a little bit worried about jumping from the fat into the fire or from the fire into the fat or whatever that cliche is?
And I think what I understand that to mean is like, don't be afraid to let things get a little hotter, right? Be a bit uncomfortable, right? So I guess it seems to me that most engineers, when you frame it in the light of you're going to keep growing and learning, they're willing to do almost anything. So I think that's one way to encourage their insatiable desire to grow and continue to gain new skills and knowledge. It does seem to me that unless it's that very niche example, that custom machine builder, most of the systems integrators I work with, the more opportunities to delve into unique projects across many verticals and sectors in manufacturing, the more attractive they are as a candidate. So it certainly doesn't seem to be a really big risk. In the end, it seems to pay off tenfold if you have more experience to demonstrate. That said, of course, nobody wants a job hopper, so we have to make those decisions very carefully and strategically. You don't go into maybe an opportunity for a new job always expecting to take it. And I think there is a literalness sometimes of that. If I'm going to interview, I would be doing so with the expectation to take the job. And of course, premise-wise, that does make sense. But everything starts with a conversation. And sometimes that conversation might not be the one for today, but you have no idea where it might go or how it could open up a door for you that won't be relevant this year or next, but maybe 3 years from now. So, utilizing and leveraging tools like LinkedIn as just one example, but being open. It's not really a risk. I think we have to reframe it.
Yes, that's what I was thinking. Is like, just judging from my own self, there have been a lot of times in my career where I'm like, I'm not desperately unhappy. I'm open to new ideas, but at what point do you know it's time to look for a new job?
That's a very key question. And it's so personal. So personal, right? I mean, sometimes the writing is so clear on the wall that it's undeniable. Other times it's a call from someone like me that all of a sudden a seed gets planted and you start thinking about it. And then you might call me back a week later and say, I know I told you I was not even open, but I've had some time to sort of think about it. And then what the heck? I think I'll at least listen. And I guess that's ultimately what I would always say is, what do you have to lose to listen?
So from the other perspective, I'm sure there are people who hire listening to this podcast and are like, stop what you're saying. Don't give any advice to my people. I want them to stay where they are. I don't want you luring them away from me, blah, blah, blah. So from an employer's perspective, I think you talked a little bit about what you can do to give an offer to get them. But from your perspective, I know it's a little bit outside of your realm of whatever, but when you're hearing from people like, I got to get out of here, or I want to leave, what are the things that make people look to change jobs? I mean, money obviously is one, but what are some of the other themes that you hear?
I feel a bit like a broken record, but it's always, I'm not growing. I want to grow. I want to learn. I mean, that is almost always the reason, in addition, of course, to salary and compensation. But I'd say that's about third. I think it's knowing I have a way to grow. And that comes with some autonomy and trust, that cultural collegiality or that brother/sisterhood that they are a part of. Collaborating. I find engineers who are collaborating less tend to begin to seek out more new challenges than those that are working closely with others. So I think isolation might play a bit of a role. It isn't uncommon for me to hear that they can't continue to grow, that they just feel as if there's not a next step. For whatever reason, that might be changes at the top that are filtering down. It might be a recent merger or acquisition. But on the flip side, like I said, there are attractive companies who are doing an amazing job of keeping their engineers challenged and working closely with the development team, the project team, and more roles are coming into play that are post deployment too, where you're talking customer success and service management. And I think there's going to continue to be more opportunities to delve into certain skills areas. I just think we've barely scratched the surface on how we'll continue to serve clients in this space in the future.
So along those lines, how do you see the market playing out over the next several years?
Do you have a crystal ball? I'd love to see it. I mean, it's clear that the technology just keeps evolving and its complexity keeps evolving. I don't have an engineering degree, but the way the IT and OT are intersecting and the integration more and more of different technologies, as well as more experienced engineers continuing to retire, we have so much of the same challenges, but a lot is going to be how we make this pathway as a career pathway more appealing to students coming into technology-related fields. I think for many reasons, the manufacturing sector as a whole was not always considered the most desirable employment pathway for people, particularly over maybe the last 3 decades. And of course, we both know there's a lot of reasons for that. But I am so excited about what's happening. Every time I talk with a systems integrator who's partnering with their local universities, it's not uncommon for me to hear that somebody's headed to a career fair at a college, right? So I know it's changing. And I think as a society, we are really starting to come back around to the value of trades and technical education and how vital that is to our economy. So I think the market over the next several years is just going to be about growth, and growth. Creativity around effectively utilizing technology to save labor and shortages on that space for our manufacturing clients. And then in addition to developing our engineers in-house, that importance of mentoring and doing our best to continue to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in that external economic environment.
How should a candidate go about deciding which recruiter, if any, to work with?
Just like anything, right? You meet with someone, you click with them or you don't, right? It's pretty simple. It's go with your gut, find someone who you believe is listening to what you tell them is important to you. I think at the end of the day, it's about trusting somebody to put your interests above your own. The nice thing about working with a recruiter is you win, they win, right? So It's really a win-win for both of you. I don't see there being much of a disadvantage. One, if you're employed, to have another set of eyes and ears out there if you know change is on the horizon. And 2, never a good idea to rely solely on your recruiter, right? It's another way to expand your opportunities. And maybe it's just to potentially see where the market looks like because you're just kind of want to put your head up and look around and you're not even potentially looking to make a change right now. But it's smart to know because you want to be ready. These things happen sometimes when we least expect it.
What makes you optimistic about the future?
I love the story of reshoring American manufacturing. Maybe part of it is my age, but I just love the patriotism behind it and what it instills in me. I really feel like this space is uniquely poised to develop, effectively transform in the next couple decades. I mean, growing sectors are really fun to work in, right? They're the place to be. I want to be in commercial real estate right now. That's a tough gig.
Neither.
Right? But my high hopes are that more young people are going to find this attractive. The idea that we're going to do a better job of training engineers. And I really appreciate that we are making inroads in those educational pathways to help to foster more skills in this space. I think those are the things that have me the most exciting. It's the new technologies that allow the landscape to keep evolving, and clearly the demand is going to follow suit.
Final advice do you have for people looking to work with a recruiter, both from a company perspective as well as a candidate one?
Well, I've talked a lot about candidates today. And like you said, we want to speak to that client. And, sometimes I end a conversation with a candidate and say, sounds to me like you're really happy where you are. I mean, maybe our conversation should end with, I have a resource that I often give that kind of helps to launch a conversation about where I am today. I think sometimes we get into a situation in our roles that we're not always feeling like that space to have some of those growth-oriented conversations are as naturally to occur as maybe they should. So I often will end a conversation with the candidate and say, hey, I think what we learned today is you have an opportunity to go back and reclaim your value. So that might be something to share for those clients who are saying, no, don't take my candidate, my employees. I think when we're talking about an opportunity to work with a recruiter, when you have hiring needs, what are the reasons you might do so? Well, of course, exposure, tons more access to top talent, especially if your recruiting partner is in your niche. So 55 years in automation and manufacturing, we have quite a vast network to really bring to you as another way to touch top tier candidates. So when you are working closely as a client with a recruiter, I think it's important to let them manage as much of the process as you possibly are comfortable doing. And that might take time to refine the relationship, really gain a good sense of what's culturally important to them. But at the end of the day, from a client perspective, there's really no disadvantages. Very rarely do clients have that ability just to extend yourself. And oftentimes there's really very little risk because it's very common for that candidate to be in play before you'd ever pay any kind of fee to place that candidate. So there is a pretty low risk, high reward model kind of built in. There are other ways that those searches can be negotiated. And sometimes it's such a hair on fire role that a retained search changes that contingent arrangement. But essentially the risk is very low. I think it's really more about finding someone you trust. And we're back to good listening and we're back to good questioning. Does that recruiter take the time to learn your systems, your processes, and your culture? And if you find one you like, stick with them. Partnerships are really valuable for everyone involved, and they're going to save all of us a lot of time.
I've seen amongst the chatter on LinkedIn and other places, there seems to be a controversy about what you put on your little banner under your profile picture, specifically that open to work or open for hire. There's like a little banner that you put under your profile picture that lets people know that you're looking for work. And there are some people who are like, don't put that on there, even if you are looking for work, because I don't know what the reasons why you wouldn't do it. I guess makes you look desperate, or I don't know why you wouldn't put it there. And then there are other people like you who are like, love to see that.
There's a couple ways you can make that demarcation through those types of tools. So some of them are a little bit more nuanced or less in your face as that banner. You can make other selections in the way that your profile is portrayed, especially if somebody like me can see a little bit more of the back end because we have a different approach and licensure, right, to LinkedIn. I think what you're asking is, should you do it or should you not?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, obviously personal. I do find that those who don't do it are going to get a lot less connecting opportunities, right? I mean, you're going to elevate your profile very quickly. I guess it depends on how many connections you want to make in your search, right? Because what happens when that happens? You're going to hear from people like me. So if that isn't really your goal, and that's not the way you want to navigate this market, then I would say you might not consider that as the right decision for you. But if you want to leverage what's available to you in terms of the way we are finding each other at this moment in time, I think it's a win-win.
And there is a way to make it almost private. Like your employer can't see it, but the recruiter can. That's the difference. It's just a different setting.
Yeah, no, you're right. That is true. But I also think employers can work hard to have a presence. And of course, it's not open to work, but it's the alternative, right? Hiring. We're hiring. And the way that they communicate their opportunities is same outcome, right? Same results to a great extent. And I can really help those employers as well. And it lets me know, oh, they've been looking for this X position for X amount of time. Maybe this candidate who I happen to know would be worthy of bringing to their attention. So when an opportunity like that presents itself, it gives us all a chance to work better with the information at hand.
Yeah, makes total sense. Miller Resource also has a podcast. Tell me a little bit about that.
We do. I'm so glad that you asked. That podcast is called Hired, and it's actually our very own podcast. Our president, Travis Miller, he is on a mission to spotlight the brightest minds shaping the future of food manufacturing and industrial automation. So he basically fosters dialogues that are unique with trailblazers in our industry. Those conversations delve into everything from hiring patterns to innovative cultural initiatives, all aimed at empowering our audience, whether they're hiring or seeking to elevate or distinguish themselves in the market in this very tricky and competitive landscape. So just a robust ideas all the time, lots of variety, very fun podcast.
If somebody's interested in listening to it, how do they find it?
You can go to our website, millerresource.com, and that is a great way to link to it. And also follow Travis Miller or Miller Resource on LinkedIn, and you'll find postings of the podcast every time it comes out through LinkedIn as well. And YouTube, I believe.
So, on a completely different topic, if you had to choose a completely different career, what would you choose?
Well, at my age, Lisa, that's a long conversation. But I will say at one point in my life, I thought it was going to be an interior designer. That maybe would be the answer to the question. Yeah. I probably would have done that.
Something a little in the creative space.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I love teaching and helping people. I mean, I really feel like I'm where I need to be.
What's the best advice you could give your younger self just getting started?
I think to be unabashedly you. And I don't know if that is coming across the way I wanted to, but just be more confident. It's okay. You're the only you out there. Just be her, I think, is probably the first thing I would say. And probably better understanding the true value of listening. I would say that I am a very extroverted person. And when I'm nervous, that's when I talk the most. And I've learned to tamper that down and really focus on listening. Because what I would like to tell her the most is when you're talking, you're not listening and you're not learning.
I had a boss who always used to say, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Amen. I know. And I think to trust my gut a little bit more. I think that that's a voice you learn to listen to over the years. But most importantly, always the golden rule. I'm just such a believer in doing unto others. I really do believe the world is round. And just to believe in that and lean into it and do good things, and good things will happen.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Talking Industrial Automation. If you're interested in learning more about Kacie or Miller Resource, you can find them on the Industrial Automation Exchange at www.csiexchange.com. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Kacie, for joining me today.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much to you, Lisa. I really have enjoyed the CSIA connections that I've made thus far, and kudos to all of you working so hard to build this community. I find it very welcoming, so thank you.
If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also really help the show by leaving a review and sharing with colleagues. We're all just slaves to the logarithm now, so I gotta ask. Thanks for listening to the Talking Industrial Automation podcast. Thanks also to bensound.com and Wistia for the music bumpers. Until next time.